Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel Shruti Karen. Today we will be covering another poem in the 2025 DSE syllabus, which is called A Certain Slant of Light by Emily Dickinson. Now, this poet specifically is one of the poets that was known to be the greatest poets of the American history. She was also known to be one of the most original poets of all times, and the interesting part about this poet is that her way of writing can be slightly archaic, which is why 3 of her poems in the syllabus can be a little bit more difficult to deal with. Now, this is one of my most favorite poems in general, so I decided to go ahead with this and talk a little bit more on this part of this literature. Feel free to mention in the comments section below on what you thought the poem was about, what you felt when you read this poem, and if you have any specific poems that you would like me to further analyze for your 2025 DSE syllabus. Now, again, this YouTube platform is open. We're trying to have all sorts of opinions. We would like to have as much feedback as possible. If you need help or if you're struggling with any of your DSE examinations, including literature and English, and if you would like to receive more support, feel free to email me on my email address, where I then discuss a little bit more on the tutoring sessions opportunities. So feel free to mention it in my emails. I will leave my email address in the description below in case there's anybody who would like to further communicate in that sense. If not, you can feel free to watch my previous YouTube videos where I further discuss on a lot of these YouTube DSE related literature materials. So let's go ahead without further ado. Now, a little bit about Emily Dickinson, right? So she was America's greatest poets of all times. And she was also known to be very original of her time. Now, she wrote in a very elliptical manner. And when we say that she writes in a very elliptical manner, what does that kind of mean? So when we say that she writes in an elliptical manner, that basically means that she paints the pictures. So she does a great job in painting pictures visually, and she doesn't give away everything in just the first go, right? So she will not be very direct or very literal about the way she writes things. It's more on the subtle side. It's more like how she paints the picture visually, and this is something we will see as we read the poem for this specific poet, which is called There's a Certain Slant of Light, and we will discuss this poem in a more thorough way. So her poems were published they were published 4 years after her death. Okay, so yes, her poems were published 4 years after her death, and her poems met with a lot of success, basically. Also notice that she was born on December 10th, 1980. So please note it's December 10th, 1980. So we are currently in December, very close to that date as well. So that's kind of like we're in the era of Emily Dickinson, basically. You could almost say that. So in her studies, and those times when, at those days, I'm also going to say the date here is wrong. It should be 1830s. My apologies. So she was born on December 10th, 1830. So just about 200 years ago, almost about 200 years ago, that's when she was born. And in those days, when they had studies in education, they used to put more emphasis on science subjects. And that could include astronomy, botany, chemistry, geology, mathematics, natural history, zoology. Those were all the subjects they used to have. Now, that's a little bit on the poet sides of things. And what we're going to do is so I'm just going to skip this slide. We're going to discuss about this in a second. Feel free to pause this if you want to. This slide is specifically looking into a little bit more on like the definition part of things. Towards your left-hand side of the screen, you would be able to see that there is a lot more slides available here, but I'm not going to make that publicly available. So we are just going to cover 3 slides, and that's basically going to be this definition slide. There is another slide here about the poem itself. The next few slides are important analysis. Now, I'm not going to go through those important analyses in this YouTube video. I reserve that specifically for tutoring sessions, so I'm going to leave that as it is. In this particular YouTube video, we're discussing on a very surface level on what this poem means and what it can tell us, but in more detail and more depth, that's when I would provide notes to my students, and I do not make those publicly available. I will, however, appreciate if you have any specific comments about the poems, if you have a certain analysis that you made on the poem, or if you had a certain point of view, perspective on the poem, feel free to share it in the comment section below. As I said, it's a very free, safe space for you to share your opinions, and I do look at all the comment section from time to time, so I will appreciate any comments that comes through in regards to the poem or in regards to anything that you felt when you were reading this poem. Now, this poem can be slightly difficult to understand in the first go, but let's take a look at it together. There is a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us, we can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it, any. This the seal despair, an imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, this like the distance on the look of death. So this is the poem. Now, first glance could be very confusing. I will, however, mention her usage of dashes, right? So usage of dashes is basically to tell you that they're all everything that you see before and after the dash are independent phrases, but they all will contribute towards a larger picture. So they all contribute towards a larger picture, okay, that she's trying to paint. Now, what happens at the beginning is she sees a certain slant of light. Now, what I want you to think about is, why might this be capitalized? Okay, why might this be capitalized? What do you think might be the purpose of capitalizing this? What's the purpose of this? So there's a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, right? So notice there's a certain ray of light, and we are currently in the setting of a winter afternoon. Now imagine, usually when you're in winters, you have an overcast of shadows, overcast of clouds, so light may not pass through as easily. At the same time, if the place is snowy and frosty, light gets reflected, so there's not a lot of light, but there definitely is a slant of light, okay? That oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. So heft is kind of like a heavy weight of cathedral tunes. So you can imagine you're in a cathedral and you hear tunes, right? Those could be like tunes that are played, with your musical instruments. So what she's trying to say is that the heavy sound of the cathedral instruments, okay, they could be very oppressing in terms of the idea that they're very loud in nature. Similarly, here it's different in the sense that the light here is being oppressive. So our light here is oppressive. It gives an oppressive feeling. So it's not being oppressed. You need to understand that. It's not being oppressed, it's being oppressive. So being oppressed means that it's being overshadowed by some clouds. But in this sense, we're saying that light is not overshadowed by clouds. Instead, it's being oppressive in the sense that it is possible that you might have a low angle of light, okay, and it's passing very effectively through the clouds, okay, so there's a low angle of light and it's very effectively passing through the clouds, and because of that, light is able to pass through, right? So when we say light is oppressive, it could mean that maybe the light is penetrating through the clouds and could be hurting the speaker's eye. Okay, we're just making an assumption. It could be hurting their eyes because it feels oppressive. It feels like it's powerful. When we go ahead in the next stanza, it says heavenly hurt. Notice the juxtaposition, right? So heavenly hurt, it gives us, we can find no scar. So this is evident that although, yes, the sun, okay, the light provided by the sun rays, it is oppressive because it's hitting our eyes. But at the same time, even though it's hitting our eyes, it feels like it's a heavenly hurt. It's not physically painful. It's heavenly as in it's beautiful, but it's just a little painful as well. So they've juxtapositioned it with heavenly hurt to say that it's giving us both the emotions at the same time. And there is no scar, as in physically there is no scar, but it could be internally there is. We don't know yet. As we move on, you will see that but internal difference where the meanings are. But internal difference where the meanings are. So internal difference is basically means that internally, right, we have different emotions. We have different aspects. We have emotional, we have social, internal social, we have psychological. All these are different perceptions. All these are different perspectives where we have each of these perspectives having their different meanings, right? So what the speaker is doing is he is kind of combining the outside world with the speaker's inner mind. That's what's happening, right? So that's what the speaker is trying to do. None may teach it means nobody can be capable of teaching this to us, right? So nobody is capable of explaining what our emotions are inside. We have different perspectives inside our head, which is called internal difference. Each of our perspectives can put different meanings to a particular situation, but nobody can teach it on like which specific way of thinking is correct. Any means nobody can teach any kind of specific internal difference that we have because we ourselves sometimes we can be very confused on how we feel. So how can somebody else explain that to us, right? So that's that. Now, with ensuring that we continue on here, let's go ahead. This, the seal, despair, and imperial affliction sent us of the air, right? So it is something that's like an everlasting, ongoing affliction. So what we're trying to say from these three stanzas is basically our speaker looks outside, they see a ray of light, but as soon as the speaker sees a ray of light, they start comparing themselves with their own perspectives. They start to go inside their own thoughts, basically. That's what they're trying to do. So you'll be able to notice that our slant of air has now evolved into this seal despair that we have, right? So the speaker looks out of the window maybe on a winter afternoon. The light seems like it has penetrated through its own emotion. So the light was so oppressive that it seems like it's gone through inside, it's penetrated inside her own emotions, where now she's having an internal conflict where she does not understand what are the different meanings she's generating from her different perspectives inside her internal self. Those perspectives are what we call as internal difference. Moving forward, when it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, this like the distance on the look of death, right? So what we're trying to say is basically two things. We're trying to say, hey, like when the light goes away, it seems like it's giving us the look of death, basically, right? Notice how there is no full stop. There's a dash at the end. So it kind of tells us that the internal feelings, okay, they're illuminated by either nature or something else, right? They're illuminated. But we only get this enlightened moment for a moment, right? And after a while, we start to feel oppressed and we have a loss of definition. That's basically what this poem is trying to tell us. Now, it's a little bit deep in nature. If you found this confusing, go ahead and rewatch this video. If you would like to receive sample notes or study notes for this poem, please feel free to comment down in the section below. You can always feel free to message me either on my email address or message me on my Instagram handle, where I'm actively available, and I will definitely answer any of your questions that you may have. For now, this is it, and I hope you really enjoyed this very short, decent video that explains this poem thoroughly. And for more information or for more suggestions or advices on anything else, feel free to mention it in the comment section below or send me an email. That's it for today, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.